Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Temple Institute Parsha class. My name is Gedalia Meyer, and I'm podcasting from Ma'ale Adumim in Israel. Most of us are familiar with the odd phenomenon known as the wake-up call. This, of course, is not merely getting woken up by somebody or something. That's just an alarm clock, or somebody coming around to get us out of bed. The wake-up call is something else entirely. It is when something happens that jolts us out of our current sleep in whatever way it may have manifested, and sends us back in the right direction. Such calls are pretty essential for most normal people. The problem is that we don't necessarily appreciate them for what they are. In fact, sometimes we are completely oblivious to their existence. First, let's get some definitions on the table. The wake-up call needn't be a deliberate attempt by somebody we know to get us out of our doldrums. The waker-upper doesn't have to be somebody we know. For that matter, it doesn't have to be somebody to begin with. It could be an event or a coincidence or something we read or heard or just about anything that serves the purpose of getting us going when we couldn't get ourselves going. It might not have anything to do with whatever it is that we are getting woken up from. It could be some completely unrelated thing that just somehow it hits the spot and wakes us up from whatever trance we were in. To give an example, a classic wake-up call is watching somebody suffer in some way from something that we ourselves are doing but cannot extricate ourselves from. These types of wake-up calls tend to be rather obvious. It could be an illness due to poor eating habits or some addiction to a narcotic. It could be some unchecked financial practice or some form of behavior that is not productive. It could be almost anything, and the warning given by the wake-up call frequently couldn't be clearer. It is simply a matter of paying attention and doing something about it. Then there are the more subtle wake-up calls, the kinds that are easily missed and don't really present any rational reason for whatever it is that they do. An example of this is seeing some passing billboard or watching something on TV or the internet that somehow hits us in a way that jars us out of the haze we were in. Picture the following scenario. A person's life is not quite on the path they want to be, for whatever reason, but they can't manage to right the ship. Then out of the blue, they see a sign saying, slow down, or watch where you're going, or something along those lines. The sign was there for a specific purpose that had nothing to do with whatever stagnation the person was undergoing. But that sign and that message just hits home in a manner that all the pep talks in the world could never have done. It was all in the timing or in the thoughts that were running through the person's head, or it was just luck. The only thing that matters is that it worked. The rest is window dressing. These things have been around since we came out of the trees. They were there in the caves, and they were there before people learned to believe in deities. They predated writing and farming and organized religion. For all we know, they were there before human beings learned to speak. It is nothing more than the human mind becoming alert to something it hadn't yet become alert to. It could have been fear or love or anger or boredom that got the person going, but it was something, and now they are a changed person. An epic book like the Bible is loaded with these sorts of things. What is that divine call to Adam in the Garden of Eden, asking him, where are you, if not a wake-up call? What was the burning bush, if not a wake-up call? What was Hashem calling to Abraham and telling him, go for yourself, if not a wake-up call? There are many others, usually pretty obvious, but sometimes fairly hidden, that qualify as genuine wake-up calls. This week's Parsha is called Vayishlach. That word means, and he sent. It refers to the lead up to Jacob's fateful meeting with his brother Esau after the two of them had been estranged for over 20 years. Jacob had run away from Esau after depriving him of the principal blessing from their father Isaac through an act which could be generously called a necessary deception. Jacob was the son who deserved to inherit his father's spiritual and moral legacy, and getting this blessing was essential to that. Esau stood in the way of that, so Jacob, through the scheming of their mother Rebekah, deceived their father into giving it to him instead. Jacob spent all of last week's Parsha away in Mesopotamia, marrying his wives Leah and Rachel, and building up his large family of 11 sons and a daughter. When he finally decided to return to his homeland, he realized that once and for all he had to face the demons of the past. He knew that Esau would somehow detect his whereabouts, so he prepared in advance for the encounter. The title of the Parsha, "And He Sent," refers to the messengers he sent out to know exactly what Esau was planning. As it turned out, Esau was coming with a small army of men. Rather than face him in battle, Jacob prepared a long parade of people and gifts for his brother. These included the members of his family set off in a specific order, and a large assortment of animals which Jacob intended to give to his brother to appease him. In the end, everything worked out fine. Jacob and Esau hit it off like old brothers, and all was forgiven. Jacob even managed to get Esau to travel on ahead of him and be out of his life forever. He realized that some things can never truly be forgotten, and that it was best for them to go their own separate ways. After this, a strange incident happens in the first town they settle near, a place called Shechem on the eastern side of Canaan. Jacob's daughter Dinah is taken in a kind of biblical rape and brought into the town by the son of the leader of the town. In a brief negotiation between them, Jacob's sons agreed to letting Dinah stay with the man who took her if all the men of the town would agree to becoming circumcised. When they agreed to this surprising demand and do the deed, two of Jacob's sons, Shimon and Levi, enter the town secretly and proceed to kill all the males. They take back their sister and essentially destroy the town. Jacob, of course, was not happy with what happened to his daughter, but he objected strongly to what his sons did. This was not the way to achieve some sort of peace with the inhabitants of the land. After this, God comes to Jacob in a very brief encounter for the first time since he had left Mesopotamia. God tells him to go to Beit El, where he had previously had a dramatic prophetic dream when he was leaving the land. The very next verse states that Jacob told his entire family to, quote, "Get rid of the foreign gods that you have among you and purify yourselves and change your garments." Then the text states that they, quote, "gave to Jacob all of the foreign gods that they possessed and their nose rings and earrings, and Jacob buried them beneath an oak tree near Shechem." The rest of the Parsha consists of short incidents that are quite dramatic and a long genealogy of the descendants of Esau. The dramatic incidents include the death of Rachel during a difficult delivery of Jacob's final son, Benjamin, and a bizarre verse in which his oldest son, Reuben, is said to sleep with Bilhah, one of Jacob's concubines. This Parsha is made of a string of drawn-out and brief incidents which share the common theme of being filled with drama. They also share another characteristic which is odd for the Bible. They rarely, if ever, mention God. That almost in-passing event with the foreign gods is worth looking into a bit more deeply. What was that all about? What were these foreign gods anyway? Why did they have them? Jewish tradition tries to excuse them as nothing more than items brought out in the spoils of the town of Shechem. But that just still begs the question, why did they take them out to begin with? Another tradition includes among them certain idols or fetishes that Rachel stole from her father when they were making their getaway from his home. Why she took them is left vague in the story, but what is clear is that her father wasn't happy about it and suspected that somebody in Jacob's entourage had taken them. It turns out that he was right, but he never found them. Rachel, for whatever reason, took them to keep them. This little incident in this week's Parsha may have come about sometime after Jacob finally discovered them among his wife's baggage. What made him decide right then and there to get rid of whatever these foreign gods were? Why didn't he do this earlier? There doesn't seem to have been any prompting in the text to get him to take this action. Even when God speaks to him, there was nothing about eliminating the foreign gods, which would seem like an appropriate thing for God to tell him. For all we know, these foreign gods were with them the entire time, but it was only now that Jacob decided to make this drastic move. What prompted him to do this? Perhaps it was that untoward business in the town of Shechem, which alerted him to the possibility that something was wrong. His daughter was raped, and his sons took vigilante justice into their own hands without consulting him, tarnishing his reputation in the area. On top of that, God spoke to him for the first time since leaving Mesopotamia, after being absent during all the trials and tribulations that had happened over that long span. God came to him for a reason, but all God told him to do was to head over to Beit El and make an altar for worship. Maybe Jacob read into these things something more than there was there on the surface. Maybe he saw them as a call for action. These were wake-up calls. The first was an alarming incident, which he very correctly saw was very threatening. The second was coming back into the spiritual realm of God. Between these two unrelated events, God woke up in him the need to do something about that problem that may have been festering in the background and collecting dust. He realized that he had to get rid of those foreign gods once and for all. They were a problem, and it was high time to deal with them. We all need these wake-up calls every once in a while. They may happen because God is looking out for us, or they may be nothing more than a simple twist of fate. But when they do wake us up, it is upon us to act. We cannot go on sleeping away in our comfort zones, blissfully ignorant of what needs to be done. A wake-up call is exactly what it sounds like. It is meant in some way to wake us up and not allow us to fall back asleep. Shabbat Shalom.